I have just experienced the highly anticipated Avatar: The Way of Water. And,
Lord have mercy, I'm about to bust.
yeah, I'm just gonna start this review by saying I'm not the biggest fan of the first film. I enjoyed it for the world building, but I never saw it as this god tier experience of a movie or ever held it as this greatest of all time level film. I think the character work is very weak in that film. The performances were really held back by the CGI at the time, although the CGI was outstanding and still holds up relatively well today. I found the pacing to be jarring upon rewatch recently, and overall it was just good in my opinion. So to say I was going in to see this movie with less interest than most people would definitely be an understatement. And let me just say, James Cameron, you had me fucking levitating in that theater. Now, for those who haven't seen it, I'm just gonna say that although this review is non-spoiler, please go see this as soon as you can. Words cannot describe the experience I just had and the nuts I just busted.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
This movie is exactly what people act like the first movie is, at least in my opinion. If you hold the first movie to this high gold standard, then I'm happy for you. Seriously, films are all subjective, and if you connected with that movie more than me, then that's completely justified. But the way people talk about the first film, this movie is exactly what I expect. This film improves and is better than the first film in pretty much every single way you can think of. For starters, this movie is 20 minutes longer than the first film, which was already long, yet this new installment feels much better paced. There aren't any parts of this film that really dragged for me. Everything in there had a purpose. The performances in here are outstanding, and yeah, some of that is thanks to the CGI being so real now. It doesn't hinder the performances in here as much as it did with the first film. Speaking of CGI in here, this shit felt real. Like, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. Like, seriously, James Cameron set the standard back in 2009, and he has done it again in 2022. The visual effects in here were breathtaking. Every frame had tons of visual effects and CGI within it, but you never really realized it because the film was so polished. Everything about the visual effects were so polished. This movie will win Best Visual Effects at the next Oscars by a fucking landslide. Now, that's not to say that this movie is perfect by any means, because I did have some issues with the film, but in all honesty, those issues are so minute. One issue I had was there was some subplots that were predictable, not in a bad way, but too specifically became obvious before they were even said. And if that was the intention, then I could completely see that as well. Also, there's a character in here who I won't name, but they have unusual abilities in comparison to every other character in the film, and it's not explained at all. And I wouldn't say this is a huge negative in the film, completely due to a third movie having already been confirmed. Therefore, if this person's abilities are explained in a future installment, then I'll see no problem with it. But in this movie specifically, it just left many questions regarding that character. Also, there's a moment towards the end of the film where 𝙀𝙀, Jake's son, goes to do something and we don't see him for like 20 minutes. And it was very noticeable the more that time passed, but that was just a minor issue. The last one I could think of off the top of my head is the frame rate changes. I don't think any of the chosen frame rates looked necessarily bad in this film, but whenever it went from high frame rate to low or switched, it made the low frame rate a lot more jarring, and it makes me want the whole movie in high frame rate, although sometimes the frame rate made the movie feel like you were inside of a video game cutscene, which could be good or bad depending on the person. For me, I definitely didn't mind it. Regardless of these tiny nitpicks I had with the film, the movie saw my expectations, turned them around, and completely fucked them. I mean, the visuals were gorgeous, and I'm not the biggest fan of 3D, but in here, it really puts you in the world of Pandora. It's not the cheap CGI where things come at your face. Cameron really used 3D to his advantage and gave the entire film a lot more depth. It added to the entirety of Pandora and this new 𝙄𝙀𝙚 clan we were introduced to, which was so captivating. All I'm gonna say is as soon as the film got to the point where they're all in water, I was locked the fuck in. The script in the first film felt very generic and predictable, like a trailer, but there's some of the best and most emotional evoking shit I've heard in pretty much any movie this year. The writing was improved. The actual story in here is also extremely engaging, and I don't want to keep comparing, but the first film's subplots outside of the Na'vi experience didn't really interest me at all, and in this sequel every subplot was compelling. Every second of every minute of every hour was engaging and compelling. Like, my 3D glasses had a blur on the bottom left of the lens that irritated me throughout the beginning of the film, but that shit became unnoticeable about half an hour into the movie because of how engaged I was. The music in here is miles better than the first film's score as well. The late great James Horner made a magical score for the first film, and the composer of this newest installment emphasized that feeling even more. Even the audio in the film in general was better. Every time a character spoke, the emotion that was evoked by the actors were completely felt. It felt authentic. Speaking of characters, James, you fucking did it. James Cameron has made me care for these Avatar characters, and as someone who didn't really care for a second film, I now demand that third one right now. Stephen Lang's Quaritch in this film returns in a different way, I'll just say, and what they did with this character in here was night and day. He is a 10 times more interesting character, and there were some very interesting parallels between him and Jake and the Na'vi in general. There are actually a lot of parallels throughout the entire movie, and it helps keep the franchise feeling consistent and coherent, although we're still exploring new ideas. There's also a new character that goes by the name Spider, and I thought he was alright in this movie. Nothing great, but I will say his character does set up some great ideas to potentially explore with future installments, which makes me pretty excited. Zoe Saldana's Neytiri didn't have much to do in the film, and I will say I need to see more Neytiri smiling because she's always going through shit, but she delivered an amazing performance as well. But Jake fucking Sully. Jake obviously is a father, and this film is very much about family thematically, and making Jake a father grounded his character in a way that makes him infinitely more likable. I didn't care at all for Jake in the first film. I just couldn't believe him being this great leader of an entire clan that he was just introduced to, but the movie definitely had me believe that Jake is a force to be reckoned with. He was that leader that the first film failed to present to me, but in here, he's the fucking boss. I also thought he was super instinctive in a place he was clearly foreign to in the first movie, and overall, he just acted really dumb, and this movie acknowledges that because his kids are just as dumb as him. In a good way, of course. Kids are always up to no good, but these kids just act like their father. They're just as instinctive as he was and are always doing what's on their mind before thinking. Took was cute, and merch with her will absolutely fly off the shelves. Kiri being voiced by Sigourney Weaver was really weird at first, but they explain everything and you end up getting used to it. I didn't mind her character too much, except she was kind of a party pooper at times. Netayem was good. He was the big brother of the family, and I enjoyed that about his character, but I noticed very early on that his character didn't have the significant screen time that other characters in here did. And I think there's a specific reason for that, which I'm not going to say in here since I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but Loak is easily my favorite character in this entire franchise. He has everything that is great about every other character, except It's in one character. He's charismatic, he's a hothead at times, fearless, also motivated, but he's confident yet vulnerable when it feels necessary. I could go on all day on how I went from not really being excited for this film to this film definitely being in my top 5 of the year, maybe even top 3, depending on whether or not the other films that I plan on watching this year are better than this. Top Gun was an experience, but this shit was beyond compare. I can't think of the last time I felt so a part of a film, embedded within the fibers of each blade of grass or hair follicle on someone's head. James Cameron delivered on something that absolutely rewarded the 13 years we all waited. Which is crazy to fucking say, but it's true. If you're watching this review and you haven't seen the movie, then buy your tickets now while you're listening to this, because you 1000% won't regret it. Yeah, it's 3 hours, but that was the quickest 3 hours I've ever witnessed while watching a film. The last time I can think of a 3-hour movie that flew by like that was probably like Avengers Endgame or some crazy shit. But it flew by because of how immersed you were into the world of Pandora. Not only that, but the characters, the story, the music, the entire journey that the film is. James Cameron, the cast, including everyone else that worked on this film, delivered on an experience that just blew me away. And for all these reasons, I'm going to give Avatar: The Way of Water a very, very moist 97%.